Hello and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 98th episode, our guest is Tom LoBianco. Tom LoBianco is a White House reporter covering Vice President Mike Pence and the probes into President Donald Trump and Russia for the Associated Press. And now, on to the show.
Hi, I'm Tom LoBianco. I'm a reporter at the Associated Press, and I'm also writing a biography of Vice President Mike Pence, former governor of Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're probably more qualified than most to do that, since you've been following his career for quite a while. So.
He's there's not many of us who find him interesting, but
but that's kind of his brand, though, right? I mean, that's kind of the way he's carried himself through his career, is just kind of being the stiff-spined conservative warrior there. So I think it's kind of been his style to be that person. So
yeah, totally.
But
I think that's by design.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and it appears to be a conscious decision on his part.
For sure.
Yeah.
But you've had. I always thought it was interesting. You've had a lot of different jobs, and you've had a very varied career. And one thing I thought was interesting, kind of looking back over all your previous positions, there is that you worked as a research assistant for Michael Dukakis, which I thought was really interesting. What was that like?
I did. Yes, actually, I'm sitting here talking with you from Union Station, right outside the Amtrak gates, and I used to study transportation.
Okay.
So I used to study trains, commuter rail.
Okay. Cool.
And that was back in graduate school. So I went to grad school for political science, and got my master's. Can you hear me all right with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
Good. Okay, good. So I went to graduate school for political science. I went to undergrad and got my bachelor's degree in journalism at the University of Maryland. And I sort of followed my old college girlfriend up north. She was going to Quinnipiac, which is in Connecticut, New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
And I was looking at graduate schools in different places because I wanted to do political science. And frankly, I reached a point, there was a point where I thought I would actually be working on that side of things in politics and government. I was incredibly fortunate to work with then Professor Dukakis. Oh, he's always Professor Dukakis in my mind. But of course, famous of course for being the 1988 nominee.
Oh yeah,
for the
absolutely.
Democrats.
Oh, for sure.
But he's a huge rail fan and real big into commuter rail, and that's what I used to study. So I used to look into things like environmental impact statements on commuter rail projects all across the state of Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah, and then you also worked as for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in that very department, right, for the transportation?
Yeah, close. I was actually I worked for the state Senate, the chairman of the Joint Transportation Committee, Stephen Bedore. Funny story about that. Bedore's district, which is in northeast Massachusetts, kind of runs over to the coast. They're in Gloucester. Carries a significant amount of the original gerrymander district.
Oh, okay. Edwin Gerry, the original. Okay.
yeah, right. The old, I think it was the old governor. I can't recall, but about 150 years ago, and that thing snaked its way up through the manufacturing towns of northern Massachusetts out to the coast. And I always got a laugh out of that. I think he had a little bit more of the beak on that that gerrymander from the old political cartoon.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, man, and I'll tell you that was interesting too. So he's a state senator, and I did communications for him. I was deputy comms director, so I'd write press releases and help him with speeches and correspondence. And I'll tell you, man, I learned a lot about the way things really work. The machinery that's always turning in the background. And if you got a journalist listening to this, I mean, the political types already know this, but for the journalists listening to this, the gears are always turning in ways that we never see. And that's our goal, really, to get behind things and try as best we can. Now, it's tough because you don't want to get stuck in the weeds and get involved in things like, palace drama and process. But it's important to point out that, what you see, when you see something as silly as a press release about a new playground being installed at the local high school, elementary school, whatever, the gears were turning on that, days, weeks, months before then.
Right.
And you never know. Sometimes it might be a swap out. It might be a political trade. People collect chips. CHITS.
Right.
And then trade them. That's how politics works.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, because my next question was what it was like to make that transition from working on the inside to kind of covering it from the outside. But it sounds like that you did get a pretty good perspective of even things we find mundane, like you were probably edited to an inch of their life, on the other end. So, but.
Well, for me, it was interesting. It was kind of a return to journalism because I'd covered Maryland a little bit during undergrad and worked at the student newspaper, the Diamondback, back in the day, and I did politics for a while. I volunteered on Deval Patrick's campaign. We all had to do that as members of the Bador team. That's just the way things are, and you have to do campaigning. It's intense, that's how things work. And it was a great experience. I learned a ton. But I also learned that I didn't really like controlling the flow of information to the public. I was kind of more of an anarchist in that regard,
Absolutely. Yeah, but when I that kind of leads me into when I first became aware of your work was when you were working for the AP in Indianapolis, of course, and you did the famous FOIA request for Mitch Daniels' emails there with Tony Bennett. I'm of course maybe a little bit biased to liking your work because I actually won one of my first journalism awards based on your reporting, so I do appreciate that. But so I may be a little bit. I'm revealing my biases a little bit right now. But what tipped you off that you should FOIA those emails? Was that like something where you like there's something here I need to see between this time and this time, or what kind of led you to that?
I'll tell you, having been around, I covered Maryland politics for 4 years before that. At that point, I'd been covering the Indiana State House for about 2 years. Had a pretty good lay of the land. We'd just been through the 2012 election. And, one of the things I noticed was that FOIA requests, generally speaking, did not get filled. And that's just look, that's how things work. If you work in a Democratic state, your FOIAs don't get filled there. They drag out for forever. And it's terrible. And, there were some examples of that under the Daniels administration. And I thought to myself, because I'd heard a little bit, we call it scuttlebutt, the rumors, the chatter that you pick up around the hallways inside the State House, inside the city-county building. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, if there's one chance I'm ever going to getting a FOIA answered, it's going to be because the Democrats just took a hold of an office that was held by a Republican beforehand.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I was looking for anything because, frankly, anything would be interesting because we hadn't seen a lot behind the scenes. They had done such a good job protecting what goes on behind the scenes that anything you can pull out of there would be fascinating. And damned if it wasn't. The language was spectacular. Because I wanted correspondence about Daniels. I wanted correspondence about the most powerful man in the state, and that was Mitch Daniels, the governor.
Right.
And you can, for the journalists listening to this, for the older journalists know this, but by heart at this point. So, my apologies for repeating some common wisdom here. But for the younger folks, you don't always have to get documents about the governor. If you're covering the State House, you do not always have to get documents about the governor from the governor's office because the governor will send messages to the other agencies.
Okay, I see where you're going. Yeah, so this was emails that he had sent to Tony Bennett, and that is the way that you got access to them, was by going that route instead of straight at the throne, as it were. So
yeah.
Right. Well,
exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah. Did you have to say I want everything between this time and this time, or what was the process for filing that FOIA that you went through?
Well, you do want to give I forget the exact term. There's a term of art for it, but you want to give some reasonable specificity to it, and there's the easiest way to do that, and the Indiana Public Access Counselor does a good job detailing this. I think is it still Luke? Is it still,
Luke Britt? Yeah, I believe he's still in the position. Yeah,
Luke's a good dude.
Yeah,
and always ready to help journalists.
Absolutely.
And if you have any questions, always check with him first. Look, try to be reasonable. Realize that these folks are, they got day jobs too. You can't sit sifting through 20,000 emails. That's just, ridiculous. So sometimes, just be clear, right? Say, I want correspondence between Governor Mitch Daniels and Secretary of Education Tony Bennett. I think I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I threw it out there for the entirety of Bennett's term in office.
Oh wow!
Because that's what. Yeah, it's 4 years. So, but the time frame might not be reasonably specific, but the parties should be, because you're looking for emails between just two people there.
Right.
And I think I threw in some other names as well. Top staffers like Chief of Staff, Legislative Director, a few others, trying to cast the net just a little bit wider. But yeah, man, I remember when I first got the first batch of emails back, I was reading through this thing, and I was looking at it, I was like, is Mitch Daniels just destroying Howard Zinn here? This is the funniest thing in the world.
Yeah, if people haven't read them yet, you should definitely go back and find them, and I'll post a link to them. But it was like I forget the exact wording, but it was like, can we get this un-American, like talking about this World War II bombardier like he's some long-haired hippie or something. That's like, wow, okay, this is interesting. On state email, by the way, which is totally seeable by anybody that has your FOIA, to put submit a FOIA request for. So. But
right,
yeah.
Well, and I think it was interesting to me was what he was doing, which is that he was trying to ban the book, and he was trying to say, how do we get this book out of college classrooms?
Yep.
How do we take it? And specifically, there was part of a broader effort to redo the way that teachers are taught.
Right.
And that's a whole different rabbit hole to fall down.
Right. Absolutely.
But it was fascinating. I had somebody who pointed out to me that one of the most important details of it, and I still remember it, the numbers, the timestamps on each thing. Sorry, I'm walking away from this loudspeaker here.
Oh, it's okay.
I just remember that the timestamps on it were like immediate. They were trading emails in real time. As soon as he would get a reply, he fired back. He was looping in other people. They were debating precisely how you're going to handle this thing, how all the ways you could get rid of, remove a book from a classroom, and
right.
And I think it was over the course of 45 minutes. He ended at, okay, do it, go, get rid of it. Make sure that this book is not being used in classes that receive credit. Period.
Right.
And I just remember reading the timestamps, and I was like, my God, this is a priority for this guy. He's not, he's the governor. He must have a million things that he has to do, right?
Right.
So that, and that's the kind of stuff that, you might not see in the moment. I mean, obviously, I sort of saw the wild language that was being used, and I mean, that was hilarious in and of itself.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. But now he's the head of a educational institution there at Purdue University. So.
He is, and I hear they're expanding.
Oh yeah.
They bought up that private online university now. Kaplan, is that it?
Yep. Absolutely. So but you also, when you were at AP, you covered Mike Pence's. I liked how you put this in your. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you said his White House flirtations. I thought that was a good way to put it. Of course, like you said, you're writing a book about Mike Pence now. It was always pretty obvious, I think, to everyone who was paying attention in the state that his eyes were always kind of on that bigger prize from the beginning. I mean, that was pretty obvious to everyone, right? I mean, he always wanted that brass ring or whatever. So,
well, I got to be honest with you. I was never quite sure what to make of it when I was covering him, because people would talk about that, and he was very polished and very scripted, and obviously an incredibly disciplined politician. He is. I think he's the most disciplined politician I've ever covered, and I covered Martin O'Malley in Maryland. I covered Bob Ehrlich for a little bit when he was governor of Maryland, and Mitch Daniels, of course, and then Pence. And it was just amazing to me, his ability to stay on script, to not get fazed by questions, and to not really, I wouldn't say he was ever nimble or agile in talking about areas, but he was always kind of on a single track, one track forward, which was the determined path. And I knew that people out here in Washington talked about him a fair bit, trying to run for president, testing the idea in 2012, ahead of the 2012 primaries. But I don't know. I guess I was just skeptical of it. And, throughout his term, I remember he would go to these fundraisers in New York City. And, I was skeptical of that too. But I think I kind of got my answer this one time. I remember it was right on the second floor of the State House. This was back in 2014. And I looked at him, and I was just like, I said, Governor, are you running for president? And I was really interested, not because I want the quote. I was genuinely interested because I couldn't figure it out. And he just kind of looked and smiled and started laughing, and then he gave the standard answer about the priority being the bringing jobs back to Indiana. Job one is bringing the jobs to Indiana, and this is the greatest, the most humbling experience of his life. The standard answer. But it wasn't. It was pretty telling.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we soon found out that he wasn't going to run for president.
Oh, yeah.
And, when he announced in, I think it was May 2015, he said he was not going to run for president.
Right.
Which is, they kind of early to make that decision, but obviously the damage from RFRA had been so severe.
Oh, absolutely.
That they had some serious repair work that had to be done.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then of course, after you worked there, you worked at the Indy Star, but then you went to CNN just fortuitously in time to start covering this last crazy election and covering the improbable rise of Donald Trump. You attended some Trump rallies. What was that like? I only saw that on TV and stuff, but you were there firsthand, so I have to know, like, what was that?
Oh, they're wild, man. They're wild. It's like, I'll tell you, the Trump rallies and the Sanders rallies both had. And this is remarkable to me. I was very fortunate to be able to go to both a couple times, and they just felt like rock concerts. And I mean, if you could look, I covered Congress a little bit before I went out to Indiana, and the Bernie Sanders that I knew was the independent Democratic Socialist from Vermont, the lone representative in the House, and the socialist with the crazy hair,
right?
Who nobody listened to, like nobody paid attention to, and that's who Bernie Sanders was. And to walk into an arena in Cleveland, Ohio, just packed to the gills with people screaming, waiting to hear from him deliver the same speech he's been delivering for 4 decades, I think. I mean, it was insane,
right?
And I'll tell you, it was that was its own style. Trump just was light years beyond that. I mean, in terms of his style, how he was doing it, he was riffing. He was jamming. He was playing off the crowd, and that crowd, they loved him. Now, I remember I was out in Iowa back at, I think it was January of 2016, right before the, probably a couple weeks before the caucuses, and I remember talking with some voters who were sitting in the bleachers, and they weren't wearing like Trump regalia, they weren't wearing American flag regalia, with just normal folks, hoodies, jeans, and I said, so are you guys, you guys Trump voters, you big supporters, who are you going to vote for in the Republican primary? And they're like, no, we don't even know if we're going to vote. We're just here to see the spectacle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's pretty telling. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I got to tell you, though, I mean, I drove, I was still working in Kokomo at the time, but I drove every day between Noblesville and Kokomo, and there was, I couldn't even tell you what a Hillary Clinton sign looked like, and yet I was still I was totally gobsmacked that he won. I was totally taken by surprise. Were you taken by surprise at all? Did you expect this, having seen it firsthand? Like, were you like, yep, I understand this, or?
So, yeah. Look, I think every political reporter was really shocked by this, because, and here's why. It's not because political reporters are hate Trump or love Clinton or whatever. It's because we have barometers of gauging these things. We do things like talk with voters, try to get a sense of where they're at. We rely on polls all the time, I think, at least as it turns out, relied too heavily on polls. Look, all the polling, and the polling aggregators. This is funny. People like Nate Silver, and, 538,
right?
New York Times polling aggregators, and they all had Hillary Clinton winning by a 90% chance of winning.
Mm-hmm.
All the way up until about 8 o'clock at night. Then it started slipping a little bit. And by slipping, I mean 80% chance of winning.
Right.
And all of the metrics pointed to her winning.
Mm-hmm.
And the metrics were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The metrics didn't capture where the metrics didn't capture. I'm not going to say where the entire populace won, because have to remember that she still won the popular vote by 3 million votes.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't capture where the populace was in the important spots,
mm-hmm.
in the Rust Belt. It didn't capture the feeling in Florida. It didn't capture the feeling in these key states that Trump just won handily.
Mm-hmm.
And look, everyone out here in Washington says that Pence was supposed to lose re-election, and that was guaranteed that he was going to lose re-election as governor.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to remind folks here that no way he would have lost re-election. He would have trounced in that election because of the Trump effect on the Republican ticket.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think that John Gregg probably came the closest he was ever going to in 2012.
Yeah, I was just pouring one out for John Gregg as you were saying that. So yeah, yeah, absolutely, and his walrus mustache too. Shout out to him. But yeah, you're right about that. That's a good point. Yeah, people do talk about it like, oh, he definitely would have. That RFRA stuff hurt him bad, and it did. I'm not going to say it didn't, because it was definitely a big embarrassment for the state. PR wise, but like you said, that Trump coattails were pretty long, and they had all three branches of government after that, and that's not an accident. So, I mean, look,
Todd Young trounced him by.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they had to, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, had to work his tail off to pull Bai out of retirement.
Yeah, that was always. I actually interviewed Evan Bai when he was campaigning that time. I thought that was kind of an interesting swap, because wasn't it Barron Hill that was going to be the person, and then they swapped it out. I don't know. That was they brought him out of retirement. He was done. He was cooling his heels. He'd already served his time in the Senate, and they brought him back. So that was a pretty interesting one. But you're back with AP now, covering the Trump-Russia story, and I'm really glad to talk to you right now, because I have to ask you about this Nunes memo and the competing Democratic memo, and it hasn't been released. We're recording on Thursday night here, so I mean things may have changed by tomorrow by the time this goes out. But what did you make of that Nunes memo? And also I know you've reported on this in the past, but he had to recuse himself originally. How is he back anywhere near this, and how was he there in the first place? Because he was part of the transition team, right? I mean, that's how is he investigating anything when he could be the subject or one of them? So,
well, I mean, all good questions. I guess and a lot to pick apart there. Mm-hmm. I guess we'll start. So the Nunes memo is a memo of now declassified intelligence. Mm-hmm. It basically asserts that Carter Page, a Trump campaign advisor, granted a marginal one at best, was the target of a political spying operation by the FBI under former President Barack Obama. I mean, the allegation and the core allegation is that Obama was using the Justice Department to spy on Trump. At the end of the day, that's what the allegation boils down to. Mm-hmm. And it really has its roots in the Trump wiretap tweet. Remember when he said, I guess it's about a year ago now, he sent out an allegation saying that he had his quote wires tapped at Trump Tower. Now that turned out to not be true. literally. But you could potentially extrapolate out from this that that's what he meant. And you got to remember, too, that Nunes was collecting information from the White House, intelligence from the White House, from contacts that he had over there. So presumably this would have been something that the president might have known about already. Yeah, maybe he didn't, but he clearly knew after Nunes went there to brief him on his findings.
Right.
So now, should Nunes have been heading the House Intelligence Committee after working on the Trump transition team? Maybe, maybe not. I think, there's a lot of people who have made some good points about that being a conflict of interest. But the flip side of that, the flip argument of that, is that that's just how transition teams are run very often. Now, what makes it different, obviously, is that the Trump campaign is under investigation. It's under investigation by the feds, by special counsel now. At that point, it was just the FBI. A pair of congressional probes. So I think there's a fair question. Now, some people raise that question when it comes to the Senate Intelligence Chairman, Richard Burr. I don't think there's as strong a foothold there because Burr was not tied into the Trump campaign quite the same way that Nunes was. So there's if there's an argument to be made, there's definitely a stronger one in Nunes' case.
Right.
So now, memos. Why are we talking about memos? Maybe we should be talking about white papers. I don't know. They wrote this. He wrote a memo where he makes the allegation, Nunes does, about the spying. All evidence based on that memo, that now that we've seen it, doesn't seem to. There doesn't seem to be any support for that allegation, at least not that we have seen yet. So the Democrats on the committee, in the House Intelligence Committee, have come up with a counter memo, a rebuttal memo, and they're trying to run this through a process of declassification that runs straight through Trump. So as we sit here on Thursday night, one of the big questions is, will Trump declassify the intelligence in a memo that theoretically rebuts the claims that are for him? So would he declassify intelligence that opposes him? It's a good question of fairness. I don't know. We don't have right now. We do not have an answer on that. We're going to find out in 24 hours.
Right. Well, and there's other people that are speculating that if he doesn't approve it, that then Adam Schiff, the person that is the Democratic leader on that committee, might just go on the floor of Congress and just read it. Just read it out. Into the record. And I don't know. Would somebody tackle him if he did that? I'm not sure what would happen exactly. So.
Yeah, there's been some talk of that. I asked Schiff that, or one of us asked Schiff that, I can't remember who, a couple of days ago, and he said he wouldn't do something like that.
Okay.
Now, that might have changed in the past couple days. But look, this points to a very interesting dynamic which we've never seen before, which is this House committee, the House Intelligence Committee, which oversees the intelligence agencies, has the power not to declassify information, but to override classifications, which is to say they can release the information without fear of reprisal. They have that power. So if you or I get a hold of classified information and publish it on Twitter, that would be a felony. So, but there's a process for it. It's not like you can just go throwing it out there any way you want. That's the process that we're going through now with the memo, right? So you have to take a vote inside the committee on whether to release the information. If you do that, then the president has 5 days to override that override of the classification. And then if the president overrides the override, then the full House of Representatives can take a vote to override his override of the override.
It's like a Russian nesting doll, to use a pun. But
and if you really And if you want to get, then there's the nuclear option in all this, which is just read the thing on the floor of the House.
Yep.
Which you can do. You can read it into the record. That is an option. But it's considered a very aggressive one, and not one that most of these guys want to do.
Right. And I think the classification kind of revolves, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it revolves around this FISA court that's involved, because those are usually completely secret, right? We don't even know when those are happening, so that, is very sensitive information normally, right?
I mean, look, the fact that I could tell you right now that the FBI obtained a FISA warrant for Carter Page is pretty remarkable. I mean, we would never see information like that.
Right.
That's kind of where we are right now. And it's a good reminder that what's happening right now in public is information warfare. It is there's a back and forth going between the Democrats and the Republicans in this, and I try to keep this in the back of my mind through all this, which is that the real investigation, the Mueller investigation, we have very little insight into.
Oh, right. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when George Papadopoulos was I never heard his name once before that, all came out, and it's like, apparently this has been happening for months. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't even know what he knows at this point. So.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fascinating that Papadopoulos, and I mean, the details were just incredible. Alleging that he could set up meetings with Putin and Trump directly, and believing that he was getting in touch with I think it was Putin's niece out in London, and I mean, just incredible. It's like spy novel type stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, to bring it back to Mike Pence a little bit, he's been kind of, I feel like, shielded a little bit because he's kind of been one step away from everything, but isn't he kind of, mixed up in all this investigation because he was the head of the transition? And, there was that letter that Elijah Cummings sent to him before the inauguration talking about, Michael Flynn, and, he claims not to have known anything. And, so I feel like he's still, might be culpable in that, even if he wasn't directly involved. He was overseeing a very key part of the, the presidency there. So.
Well, it's a big question, and remember what we said earlier about him being incredibly disciplined. He's also incredibly cautious.
Yeah.
Now, can you exercise enough caution in Trump world?
That's a good point.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're going to find out the answer to that.
Absolutely.
But there has been some information. There's been some questions from the House investigators. They want to hear from him. There's a report in the Wall Street Journal to that effect. It's hard to tell. I wrote a story with my colleague Ken Thomas kind of about the Pence's ability to avoid danger, to avoid traps, to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that caused just this chaos inside the White House for other Trump advisors.
Yeah,
and it was fascinating because people who have read through the transition emails on the House Intelligence Committee said they could not find his name anywhere in them. And what was interesting about that is that he was the director of the transition.
Right.
So now, look. Now here's what the official Pence response on this is that even though he's the director of the transition, it doesn't mean that he would have been sending emails, would have been replying to emails, or that he even would have been written about in those emails. So, there's some big questions there about, was there any exposure? The Flynn stuff is very interesting. You remember when Flynn got picked up by or went in and agreed to the plea deal? They said that Pence's office said that they felt vindicated by that because it proved that Flynn had lied. It's in the court documents. And you know what? He had hid that from them by all accounts. We do not know otherwise. Now, if that turns out not to be the case, that is a huge problem point for Pence. So, yeah, I mean, look, if you're in the Trump transition team, you're in the Trump campaign. If you're in the Trump White House, this could touch you in any way. It's sprawling out, and this thing is gone from being an investigation about potential collusion to now including questions of obstruction of justice.
Right.
And that goes right into the White House. It had nothing to do with Russians reaching out to members of the Trump campaign. It was all about them trying, as they say, the cover-up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think it's insignificant that Pence is the only person in the White House that Trump can't fire, so he probably scored himself a plum deal there. So
that is how. Yeah. It helps when you have the Constitution at your back.
That's right. Absolutely. Now, I know you're writing a book, like you said, about Mike Pence. Any chance of getting an interview with him at this point? I doubt it, right? I mean, probably not.
Remains to be seen.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
No,
all right.
I mean, it's a biography of him. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Let's keep it open. Yeah. No. Let's don't close that door. Absolutely. I hope you get it. Yeah. That would be an interesting thing. So, well, I know you got to go home. I don't want to keep you at the train station any longer. One more question before we go. I always ask this.
Yeah.
What music have you been listening to lately?
Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. Make me pull up my Spotify. Gotta hope Spotify. I really hope Spotify doesn't go under. Well, I can tell you what my wife's playing. She's playing Music Together, which is something we play for our baby.
Aww.
And it's like, so she's probably putting her to sleep right now. Here we go. I've been on a big 90s metal kick recently, so I was listening to a little Corrosion of Conformity.
Whoa, bringing it back.
Yeah, man. Here's the Clash. Here's the Shaun White snowboarding official soundtrack.
Oh my gosh!
Good rock on there.
Got any Tony Hawk skateboarder soundtrack on there?
Yeah, totally, man. Let's see. Here's the Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock soundtrack.
Nice.
That's a good one.
Nice.
Here's the 311.
Okay.
I will admit, I enjoy 311.
The self-titled album, that was one of my first albums. I'm not even going to lie. I was right there.
Here's some Incubus on here.
Wow.
Definitely, man. A little Steely Dan. I got some Steely Dan down in there, too.
There's no shame in your game, is there? At all.
No, man. Not at all.
Yeah, I think I said to somebody the other day, I'm just appreciating Steely Dan years old. So
Yeah,
just starting to get into it. Yeah, they pick the best people. I'll say that. They really pick the best players to surround themselves with. So I mean, there's no fronting on that. So
Dan's the best by far, by a mile. I always love listening to Steely Dan when I'm writing. It's like so relaxing.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Well, hey man, thanks you so much for jumping on the phone. I hope we can talk again soon. Good luck with your book. I'm loving the idea of you writing about Mike Pence. I wouldn't want to read anyone else about him. You've followed him longer than anyone else I know. So
thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, dude. And man, keep on kicking ass out there.
Awesome.
Thank God every day for you and every other Indiana journalist, because this is what matters. You never know when your governor is going to be picked for the White House, and then every snotty Washington reporter comes calling and like, well, hey, what actually happened back there? So
that's right. You want to know about President Eric Holcomb? You got to come through me, baby.
That's right, man.
Cool. Well, hey, have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon, dude.
Awesome. See you, man.
All right, see ya.
If you enjoy this podcast, there are several ways to support it. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. I have a Patreon account which can be found at patreon.com/Rob Burgess Show Patreon. I hope you'll consider supporting in any amount. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, and RSS. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. And if you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Until next time.